Yesterday, documents were unsealed in General Michael Flynn's criminal case that revealed that Peter Strzok is personally responsible for keeping the case open when the FBI already thought it should be closed. Now, I did a Periscope on this topic yesterday afternoon, and that Periscope will be presented to you shortly. But first, if you are new here, please do subscribe to the YouTube. Hit subscribe, youtube.com/humanevents. We're brand new here, but we're trying to give you all the high-quality content you want. Now, enjoy the Periscope. Start here. Today, these are new documents that just came out, April 30th, 2020, a report by Sean Davis, although it's in other places as well, The Federalist. Breaking, the FBI closed the Flynn case, dubbed CROSSFIRE Razor, in early 2017 until Strzok ordered it to stay open. Yeah, pretty aggressive. Now, I'm not sure how I would frame it as Strzok ordered it, but Strzok persuaded his higher-ups or persuaded people to keep it open. I don't know if he actually ordered it. We'll look at those documents momentarily. But just to explain, again, this is a document filed this morning, a supplement, and essentially about the fact that there are new documents produced to them as a result of this new review of the case by the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Missouri, who was tasked by Attorney General Barr with taking a second look at the case. So we have this describes that, and they posted the entire exhibit for our review. So we'll kind of go through it. We'll skip around a little bit because there are different parts of it that are sort of like the beginning and the end are relevant, and it's just you need to kind of work through it to understand what's going on here. But anyway, so first thing first. All right. The only thing I want you to keep in mind here is this is a closing communication PDF, and I want you to keep in mind the date and time. This is January 4th at 1:49 p.m. January 4th, 1:49 p.m. This email sent by who knows who contains a closing communication, and it is this document, the closing communication for the Michael Flynn matter. So again, this is January 4th, 2017, closing communication from the FBI. The FBI opened a caption case based on the articulable factual basis that CROSSFIRE Razor may wittingly or unwittingly be involved in activity on behalf of the Russian Federation, which may constitute a federal crime or threat to the national security. I just want to start off by being how absolutely insane that is. That is nuts. That is straight nuts that the FBI would investigate this. That is literally out of a Tom Clancy novel, and it never made a single lick of sense. The fact that they even opened this investigation is an embarrassment. Just start there. That's a nuts, absolutely ridiculous theory to be investigating, right? Absurd. Basically, they describe CR as the advisor to then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump for foreign policy issues since February 2016, having ties to various state-affiliated entities of the Russian Federation, as reported by Open Source. I think that would be the fact that he went on RT or something and traveled to Russia on December 15th. So, and this would have been Michael Flynn. Again, reading this is just insane. The goal of the investigation was to determine whether the captioned subject associated with the Trump campaign was directed and controlled by and or coordinated activities with the Russian Federation in a manner which is a threat to the national security. What? The idea is whether Flynn was in fact a Russian spy who was about to be the national security advisor. Absurd. Absolutely absurd, offensive that this investigation was even started. All the agents involved, I'm sorry if you ended up doing the right thing later, but all the agents involved should be embarrassed for themselves and should never ever, the fact that you even participated in this sham is ridiculous from the outset. But the key point, this is on January 4th. The FBI requested any derogatory information on CROSSFIRE Razor. That's Michael Flynn. They found no derogatory information. In addition, they requested a search of their holdings for derogatory information. Somebody else searched their holdings. No derogatory information. They also looked at CHS reporting. I don't actually know who this. Any derogatory information. There was nothing. Other than this cab ride, which I don't know a huge amount about. I'm not going to talk a lot about this sort of thing, but apparently Stephen Halper, and whose story I'm not that familiar with, just straight up lied about Michael Flynn at some point, and this lie essentially was revealed here somehow. I mean, that's from this tweet by Undercover Huber that says, he wasn't at the dinner with General Flynn, but said he witnessed it. So, I mean, that's fascinating, but that's too much for me to even do. I'm going to focus on the actions of Peter Strzok, and I'm going to focus also, in particular, the way he kept this case open and the fact that he meddled with the 302s. So anyway, there's more about this, but basically all this, there's no reason to keep the case open. So Jack says CHS equals Halper. Well, that makes sense. So no reason to keep this case open. It's closed. This is a draft communication that says the FBI is closing this investigation if new information is identified or reported to the FBI regarding the activities of CROSSFIRE Razor. The FBI will consider reopening the investigation if warranted. Wow, right? So now we're going to skip all this because we'll talk about this stuff later. I want to get down to here. Okay. January 4th, 2:11 p.m. Remember, go back to the stop. This document sent out at 1:49 p.m. and 20 minutes later, Strzok sends a text to somebody. Hey, if you haven't closed this, don't do it yet. Sorry, Razor, which means Flynn's case. If you haven't closed Razor, don't do so yet. Finds out whoever's the case agent. And then these texts are incredible. Strzok text page at 2:19. Quote, Razor's still open, but serendipitously good, I guess. You want those chips and Oreos. Phew. Gosh, like the romanticness of FBI conversations is just unbelievable. It's like kids' playtime. Page says, but yeah, that's amazing that he is still open. Good, I guess. Strzok to Page, yeah, our utter incompetence actually helps us. 20% of the time, I'm guessing. I.e., there was never anything on Flynn. They knew it in advance. Basically, they're conceding at this point that he should have been closed. The fact that he was even still open, they're saying, is reflective of incompetence. So, again, what that means is Peter Strzok and Lisa Page believed from the outset that there was no basis to continue investigating Michael Flynn. They believed it. They did not believe so. He said, anything I can... So there are more texts from Strzok to somebody else, anything I can help with, just him trying to get Razor closed, saying the 7th floor is involved. That's the top level of the FBI, so McCabe and Comey at that point. Don't close Razor. I'm going to talk to you, and they managed to, do that. And all this, this stuff, I don't know the relevance of the stuff about Pre-Step and Andy, but I do know basically, it was the work of Peter Strzok, who is the single guy who is the most motivated guy to ensure that Michael Flynn's case didn't get closed, even though the FBI found no reason to continue investigating him for being an agent of Russia. And you start to get a sense of why Strzok might have been doing that, because that day, this was caught by Casual Semi, apparently. That day, this is from a Judicial Watch FOIA production. There was essentially this was a text sent by Strzok to Page that morning, 9:53, and it didn't have anything, but the attachment is the congressional research document on the Logan Act. So, on January 4th, when Peter Strzok is trying to keep the case open, when the FBI is saying there's nothing here, Peter Strzok is thinking, well, the Logan Act is a possibility. Keep this case open because I want to go after Flynn. That's appalling. No one has ever been prosecuted for the Logan Act, ever. It's pretty clearly unconstitutional, as Jonathan Turley explained. And yet, on January 4th, when this case was going to be closed against Flynn, it was Strzok who decided to try and bring back this this statute that had never been used to convict anybody, ever. And that was Strzok's idea. That's why Strzok wanted to keep the case open. These guys wanted to railroad General Flynn. They knew it from the beginning. It was always always embarrassing. So that's the January 4th stuff, right? And a good way to think about the information, that there's 3 distinct portions of it. There's the January 4th stuff, which deals with Strzok's actions to try and keep the case open desperately relating to the Logan Act. There's the next stuff we're going to talk about is from the 22nd and 23rd. So these are these emails. So here, email Peter Strzok to Bill Priestap and Dina Corsi, who I don't know, but haven't looked too much into that. We just got an email. I just got an email from Molly McCann. So if you want to, I'm going to check that really quick. Actually, I don't want to do that. Sorry. That means I'm showing you guys live my email, and I don't want to do that. I'll look into that after this if necessary. Maybe I'll do a second scope. I don't know. I got to focus on doing this one. Anyway, Peter Strzok to Bill Priestap. What is he proposing? He's saying provide a defensive briefing to him about Crosswind. We still don't know who Crosswind is. Beyond that, I'm not certain. I think my preference would be to provide him a defensive briefing, put him on notice, and see what he does with that. Now, James, this is Saturday the 21st. Remember, what is Peter Strzok trying to do here? They're thinking very hard about how can they get him to lie. But here's what they're sending out to people. They're sending, we should provide him a defensive briefing. That's to help him. Right? A defensive briefing is not an FBI interview. So, basically, this is pretty big evidence that, what, Peter Strzok was doing was very much under false pretenses. They were saying, we are going to, provide him a defensive briefing, but then also try and induce him to lie. This is a remarkable piece of evidence as to like what Strzok's intent was, and also like it sort of colors the context of the conversation that Flynn had and whether or not he would have knowingly lie. Again, very relevant evidence, very relevant to state of mind, exculpatory, and therefore must be produced under Brady. We talked about that yesterday. So this goes further. This is somebody else sending back to Peter Strzok. He said, based on this position, we would usually tell him about wind. I don't know we still don't know what wind is. I'd be interested in letting that play out a bit before he tells them, and the whole thing goes underground. At the very least, I think we need a debrief or interview Razor unless told not to. I think we will get to him regardless. We should try to frame them in a way we want. I mean, this is really, really... this sentence right here is jarring from whoever this is at FBI or DOJ. I think we need to debrief or interview Razor unless told not to. They sort of suspect that they would get told not to do this by their superiors at the White House. But they're like, we need to do this. We need to undermine the White House. Like, I don't know who wrote this, but whoever did, very, very disturbing, especially given how thin the entire read was in keeping this investigation open on the pretense of the Logan Act. Note that it was Strzok who sent this to a number of people: Jennifer Boone, Jonathan Moffa, and I think the first time he sent it was to Lisa Page, if I have that right. I don't remember that exactly, but I'm pretty sure Lisa Page saw it. Yeah, here we go. Lisa Page saw this a while back. Oh yeah, here it is, 7:30 p.m. And then let's go to kind of the text on the 23rd. So, you know, this is why all those conversations were happening. If you guys remember, right, we have, yesterday's document release had a whole bunch of stuff like Peter Strzok sending James Baker and other people questions that McCabe should ask Flynn. And a discussion about 1001, the false statement crime, and whether or not you needed to tell the subject that that of course lined at the FBI as a crime, which they didn't do. They admittedly didn't do that. So back to these down here. So it says, this is a text from Strzok to Page. We'll see about Bill. He was pretty adamant about what Andy said with regard to that. And he mentioned that on Saturday. He had several conversations with Andy. Bill's sense with it, I don't know what that means, typo. And he wanted to know why we had to go aggressively doing these things openly. I worry that Bill isn't getting the underlying distinction that I think is clear, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so what's relevant here? Again, this is Bill Priestap saying, why are we aggressively doing these things? And this is the day before Flynn's about to be interviewed. This is when they're all planning the Flynn interview and to try and get him to perjure himself. And Bill's the guy wondering why we had to be aggressively doing these things. And that's relevant because if you remember, like these notes, Bill Priestap, like he's sort of writing these. It's not clear what the exact date is for these notes. Like they say clear, our goal is to determine if Flynn is going to tell the truth of his relation to the Russians. This might be the guy worrying about, like, is this what we're doing? We're just trying to, like, you know, get him to lie, and the point of that is to get him to be fired and prosecuted. Like, it may be that Bill Priestap, who's the guy who reportedly wrote these notes, is being kind of pushing back behind the scenes and being the one to say, like, hey, like, what are we doing here, guys? This is ridiculous. Like, we don't have a case against this guy. Why are we going to the White House, circumventing normal procedure to interview him? It'd be a very good question. And then more stuff from Bill Priestap. This portion I didn't understand, or I couldn't really interpret. Other than that there was some dissension between D, who I assume is Comey, the director, and DD, Deputy Director McCabe. But we don't know what that dissension was about, so it's really hard to interpret those text messages. But also important to keep in mind, like, timeline here and some of the other materials that we have. Remember, so this is a timeline that was put together all the way back in October 2019 when you know, like Sidney Powell was trying to put together, you know, essentially get the entire case thrown out. And, you know, an important thing to keep in mind is at the same time there were texts from, you know, like internally, and there, you know, Lisa Page is texting Strzok. I can feel my heart beating harder. I'm so stressed about all the ways this has the potential to go fully off the rails. Clearly, this being the whole attempt to interview Flynn. There's the fact that there's this interview to not alert him to the investigation, to keep him relaxed. And then all these other random texts. But let's look at some of these, I think, if I remember correctly. So here's the date, right? I can feel my heart beating harder. I'm so stressed out. And then, Peter Strzok's like, I know, I just talked with who we're getting together. As soon as I finish that write-up for Andy, I reminded how I told Bill and the entire group we should wait 30 to 60 days after the inauguration to change how we're managing the stuff. As it is, he went ahead and everything is completely falling off the rails. I think our stuff is good on our cases, but I have no hope or understanding about what they're doing on Jen's side of the house. Basically, it feels like they're rushed. It feels like this whole CROSSFIRE hurricane investigation at this point was about to be closed because they knew that the new administration was in town. And so they're like kind of getting reckless and aggressive, and that's probably what the environment was in which they tried to interview Michael Flynn. But finally, and this is like something I think I want to focus on, that is a novel point I haven't seen many people making in terms of what was going on with these documents. I want to focus on this last text conversation. This is all that's in the new production that's relevant, but we'll go through these texts. Lisa Page to Peter Strzok, 5:37 p.m. on February 10th, 2017. Quote, "This document pisses me off. You didn't even attempt to make this cogent and readable. This is lazy work on your part." It's kind of funny to see Lisa Page ripping into Peter Strzok for being lazy. This is the key set of text messages here. This is almost a smoking gun and the kind of thing that should have absolutely been disclosed. Lisa, you didn't see it before my edits that went into what I sent you. I was, 1, trying to completely rewrite the thing so as to save X's voice, and 2, get it out to you for general review and comment in anticipation of needing it soon. I greatly appreciate your time in reviewing your edits. I incorporated them. Thank you. And Strzok says, should I say, trying not to completely rewrite. I did the edits better than I'm IMing. So basically what he's conceding here is that this is a document. It's not necessarily, we're not sure this relates to 302, but this is a document that required enormous amounts of editing. Okay, what document were Peter Strzok and Lisa Page working on February 10th and before, at that period, that would need to save someone else's voice, need a huge amount of edits, and was very important? Okay, well, the answer to that is the Flynn 302, the famous Flynn 302. This is the document right here, the one that was ultimately published on, or finalized on February 15th, 2017, so 5 days after that text conversation, and it contains Peter Strzok's and another agent's essentially memorandum of reduction to paper of what happened and what Flynn said in that interview. This is like the single most important document in Michael Flynn's case. This is the document that gets to the heart of whether or not you can actually bring a false statement charge against Flynn, because this is the basis, the record of what Flynn said. Okay, so again, going back, you have all this stuff about Strzok talking about how he had to try hard not to completely rewrite the 302 these notes, and this is on February 10th. We have other texts at that time, right? That's not the first time. So this is text produced all the way back in October or sometime earlier, stuff from Peter Strzok. We don't know exactly who the recipient is. Peter Strzok, to February 10th. Hey, I was considering what you said. Please just drop off what you have. I'll incorporate it tonight, tomorrow. To February 10th, unrelated, but you need to finalize that ASAP. I wouldn't be surprised if following this evening's events that a request comes in to see it. So again, like, what's really urgent at that particular time? It's the fact that the Flynn 302 hasn't been finalized, because this is when the news is coming out trying to push Michael Flynn to get fired. He ultimately resigned on the 13th, 3 days after this. Here, I gave my edits to Bill to put on your desk. Bill didn't leave your edits, my office, etc. I made your edits. I also sent them to Joe. I also emailed you an updated 302. I'm not asking you to edit it this weekend. I wanted just to send it to you, and hopefully it doesn't need much more editing. So again, more concession that they're working on this updated 302 to edit. Like, lots and lots of concessions. And so when you put this together and you combine it with this right here, which talks about how there's a document that they need to save somebody else's voice, that would have been Joe Pientka, the other interviewer, and they need to not completely rewrite the piece. Like, this is a 302 that has gone through unbelievable amounts of editing, and they're trying not to completely rewrite it. That's not the basis to say that that's the guy who said it. Moreover, think about the delay here. The interview was done on January 24th, and the final document wasn't published until February 15th. That's the 3-week time frame between when the interview actually happened, no audio or video recording of that, remember, just the notes, and then when it was finally reduced to paper in the form of a 302. That's an unbelievable amount of time. There's no way that should have been reliable or credible or taken as such. And the fact that it wasn't pressed is appalling. Also, the fact that this is clear Brady evidence, right? This is clearly exculpatory, because if the false statement is like what they're thinking about charging him for, then stuff that would diminish the credibility of the 302, stuff that would indict it, stuff that would suggest it wasn't accurate or had problems in its production, that would be absolutely exculpatory evidence for Flynn. It must have been produced. And here's the other thing. Where are these documents? These are DOJ SCO. SCO stands for Special Counsel's Office. That means it was almost certainly in the hands of the prosecutors, Brandon Van Grack and Zayed Ababa. They almost certainly had these text messages and they didn't produce them. And there's no way they wouldn't have looked through these. There's no way. I mean, remember, the Page Strzok text messages were like all over the place, huge news, well before Flynn was even indicted, right? Like if you're talking about the time frame here, let's see my friend the time frame piece, right? So the basically Lisa Page left the special counsel, and the IG notified Mueller of the text messages in mid-June, right? Flynn didn't plead until late November. There's like 4 to 5 months here of a window when the special counsel's office would have known about these text messages and then continued their prosecution of Flynn. And they never, ever disclosed it, that basically there were all these problems with 302. Never, ever, ever did they do that. And they had text messages saying, we've completely revised it. We're trying to avoid re-editing it. Absolute garbage. So that's really remarkable. A huge violation. But moreover, remember, like, you know, when they're talking about, trying not to completely rewrite it, what are they talking about? Well, this is a different version of the 302. This one didn't get produced until well after. I mean, it took, Sidney Powell to fight tooth and nail to get this produced. This edited 302. This was on February 11th, 2017. Unclear who wrote it or who did these edits, but some of these things are really important. For example, like this statement here, the interviewing agents asked Flynn if he had made any request of Kislyak to vote in a particular way or take any action. This is a straight up insertion. Flynn stated he did not, and that's in the indictment here about like whether the fact that would be a false statement, right? Did you ask Kislyak to vote in a particular way? And this was on the Israel resolution. It says Flynn stated he did not. That was not. There's no deletion. That's literally just straight up inserted. And then he said, it says here, Flynn stated he did not believe his calls to various countries would change anything. That's a very different answer from Flynn stated he did not. Wasn't in an earlier version of this, and then it got inserted later. In fact, it got inserted 3 weeks later on February 11th. Unbelievable in terms of how disturbing this is. Right, like, for example, so this is not the escalation portion, but here's the false statement. This is a false statement about the United States Security Council resolution, and it says that Flynn falsely stated that he did not request that any of the countries take any particular action on the resolution. Flynn also stated the Russian ambassador never described his response. In truth and in fact, however, Flynn then and there knew that the following had occurred, and it goes through that. So, I mean, this is literally something at the heart of the indictment against Flynn, is something that was added to a 302 3 weeks later. Not acceptable at all. Absolute, total garbage. So, what, kind of just to put a big, bow on all this, we have had so many interesting disclosures. We learned that Covington had not produced all the relevant documents and decided now to, additionally produce an additional 6,800. We learned that Covington thought they had a deal with the lawyers, Van Grack, to avoid the prosecution of his son. That was never disclosed publicly. We know, moreover, I mean, we had a whole bunch of disclosures back yesterday finding out that they were debating how to essentially entrap Michael Flynn, how to make him feel at ease. They debating exactly how much they had to tell him under 1001. They wanted to casually slip it in. They were just trying to entrap him. We know that it was over the Logan Act stuff, which had never been prosecuted ever. And now we know that basically all the way back on January 4th, 2017, 3 weeks before Trump even took office, the FBI was ready to close this absolutely asinine investigation into Michael Flynn. That saying again, I mean, it's just unbelievable when you even read that he may wittingly or unwittingly be involved in activity on behalf of the Russian Federation. Insane stuff. So, absolute nonsense. We know, at this point, I think you could say that Flynn's been exonerated in a number of ways. The fact that the 302 is edited means there's not sufficient proof that Flynn lied, because the 302 is the only record of the interview, and there's lots of reason to believe it was heavily edited and not necessarily an accurate reflection of what Flynn said. So whether there were any falsehoods Flynn is exonerated on. Whether it was material, Flynn is also arguably exonerated on, because of the fact that there literally wasn't a legitimate investigative purpose to this anymore. On the January 4th, they thought Flynn should not be investigated, and they still continue to do so. So that's two areas of exoneration. The other big reveal here is, again, I think it's going to be really hard to prosecute some of the FBI agents involved because it's not clear. They can argue that, well, they thought they had a legitimate purpose, etc. But the people who are, I think, in biggest trouble are the prosecutors on the Flynn case who didn't disclose this stuff. Remember, this was not disclosed. This case has been going on for like 2.5 years now, right? The plea happened in November 2017. It's April 2020, almost May 2020. We're talking 2.5 years, and it took 2.5 years for these documents to be produced. Federal prosecutors have had them the whole time, especially those text messages. I mean, these text messages are straight up unbelievable. They would have had them right off the bat since before Flynn pled, and they would have held on to them for 2.5 years with Lisa Page and Peter Strzok texting each other about how they had to work their ass off not to completely rewrite the piece. So that is some incredible, incredible stuff. All right, folks, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that, please subscribe to the YouTube channel by clicking here. Also, make sure to check out Will Chamberlain, twitter.com/Will Chamberlain, and periscope.tv/Will Chamberlain for more content up to the minute. Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.